were burned alive inside their home. My mother fed us the gluey mess of a boiled blanket. We walked for hours searching for the firewood and water that would keep us alive, and were beaten by local security forces if we strayed too far. The land we lived on would never be ours. We prayed that one day we would be embraced by any country. I wrote because I wanted to find meaning in these tragedies. There are many stories of hope. Refugees built lives in the camp in spite of the restrictions. We opened stores and planted gardens. We studied day and night in order to continue going to school. And then the luckiest among us walked for days to get to that school. We had weddings and graduations, festivals in which we sang the songs of our Bagogwe heritage. If you closed your eyes, it was as though you were home in Congo. Babies were born to ecstatic mothers and fathers. Some of us were able to leave and start lives elsewhere. I was helped by a miracle. For many, just enduring Jihembe is a triumph worth telling over and over. I wrote to feel connected to the tens of millions of refugees searching the world for a home. Sometimes we heard stories about them on our radio. Refugees were fleeing from the Middle East, Central America, and East Africa. A refugee crisis, the reporters called it. In so many ways, their lives were exotic to me. I had never been to Syria or Myanmar, but in other ways, their journeys were identical to the one I took in 1995 when I fled violence in eastern Congo with my family. By writing about what came after that flight, after the gates to a refugee camp close and the journalists leave, I hoped to remind the world that the refugee story doesn't end once they arrive in the camp. I hoped that none of these new refugees would be forgotten as we were for decades. Forever refugees lost in a permanent impermanence. I wrote because I wanted to remember. I wanted to remember the sound of the wind in the forest in Congo, and the stories my grandmother told me and my siblings before we went to sleep. I worried that unless I wrote them down, I might forget my friends Celestin and Patrick, who died in the massacres in Mudende refugee camp, or my parents' friend Alphonse, who rescued me from a life with the Congolese rebels. My mother's traditional Bagogwe dress, which she wore only on special occasions. My father's laugh as he sat around the fire with friends, even the groan of one of our cows giving birth on a pasture in Congo. These are all remembered in these pages. But trauma makes a joke out of memory. I fled my home village when I was 3 years old, and not all of my memories of that time are my own. Much of what I remember was told to me by my parents and older siblings, or my friends, or absorbed through things I read or heard on the radio. Some are impressions. I tried my best to translate into language. Like a wild dog gnawing at a piece of meat, trauma can destroy our understanding of time. When my father appeared at our door in Bikenke, my home village in Congo, with blood running down his face, that was just a single moment in my life. And yet I remember it as though my father stood unmoving in the doorway, bleeding slowly, for hours or even days before we started running. Sometimes I think he still stands there, wounded, telling us our village is being attacked. Trauma creates fantasies. It warps real life. I cannot say truthfully that after he died, my uncle begged his killers for answers as to why they killed him. And yet I remember him doing so as well as I remember my high school graduation. Sometimes I force